What if your best looking training videos are quietly making learning harder? And not because your content is wrong, but because the brain is overloaded before the lesson can land. Let's talk about how to fix that. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are and wherever you're watching from. Welcome to the Visual Lounge. Let's just dive in. Imagine a postcard-sized desk. Tiny, right? That's your learner's working memory. Put a few items on it, and it's great. Stack on a few more, and well, things are going to start sliding off. In learning, that desk has two incoming channels, the auditory channel, the words which I say, and the visual channel, which the viewer sees. If we pour in too much, busy screens, dense narration, duplicate text, things are just going to start falling off the desk. That's cognitive overload. Our job is to design so only the right items are on the desk at the right time. Today, we'll use some proven multimedia principles to do three things. Eliminate the noise we add by accident. We're going to respect the brain's limit with smart pacing and find ways to guide the eye so attention lands where meaning lives. Now, extraneous load is mental effort that doesn't help learning. It's clutter on the desk. If an element doesn't point to meaning, it's probably noise. So we want to start thinking about cutting decorative backgrounds, pop-ups, extra toolbars, and sometimes our clever flourishes that really don't serve the current setup. A common overload pattern is actually reading and watching at the same time. So if you're using full sentence text on screen while narrating over live interface, that's going to force the visual channel to read and track the demo simultaneously while the narration competes for attention. So here's what you can do instead. First, let your voice carry the why. Let the screen, when you show it, carry the what. And keep on-screen text short and purposeful. You can think about labels, maybe keywords or steps, numbers, but put full sentence and captions on or transcripts, not floating over the demo. And while scripting or you're going through your review process, here's three quick questions you can ask. Is this element necessary to understand this step? Is any text duplicating what I'm saying? Can a viewer tell instantly what matters on the screen? And if the answer to the last step is no, we'll solve it shortly by guiding the eye. Remember, everything has to fight for a place in your video. That's audio, as well as visual, as well as text. Now, intrinsic load is the complexity of the content itself. I can't make a 15-step workflow inherently simple, but I can make it learnable. How can we do this? Well, we could break the lesson into small, meaningful clusters, maybe 2 to 5 actions per cluster, and you can finish a cluster by giving it a brief breath. Then you can move on. If the platform supports it, you can let the learners click, continue, which I know gets a bad rap, but sometimes it might actually be really good. And if not, you can insert a short verbal reset. Phase 1, record. Do the steps. Phase 2, edit. Next small cluster. Phase 3, export. Those 2 to 4 second resets let working memory file what it just learned before the next items hit the desk. There's probably lots of ways to do this. Another one is you could just invite the learner to pause the video and let them take the breath that they need. Now, when terms or parts are new, teach the pieces before the process. 30 to 60 seconds of meet the parts plays off. For example, you'll use the timeline to cut the canvas to see changes and export to produce an MP4. That's all we need for today. Now, during the workflow, learners aren't decoding labels and following logic at the same time. Segmentation and pre-training don't dumb down anything. They actually sequence complexity so the tiny desk never overloads. Now, I realize I've covered a lot of vocabulary, and I'm about to introduce a new term which you might be saying, oh my gosh, this is a lot of learning science. And it is, but it's good to know. Germane processing is the good effort, the mental work that builds a durable mental model or schema. Both are good terms and both well worth knowing. So we maximize our mental model or the good effort by directing attention and aligning our timing. You want to tell learners exactly where to look and why it matters. Even in a talk to camera format, we can give you an example. For instance, if I were to say, in the top right, the save button, this locks in your changes. That's going to make immediate sense to you. Now, if I were to cut to screen occasionally, you could do something like a tight crop and a consistent highlight, give it an arrow, an outline, or halo or something, use sparingly to add to that understanding, the clarity that you're going to provide. One thing you can do as you show a step is say the action as the action happens. You might hover a beat, then say the action, and then perform it as it's said. Words and visuals actually should arrive together so that your viewer doesn't have to hold one thing in working memory while waiting for the other. There is a slight option there that you can say, start moving the cursor, give it a little bit of lead so the eye starts following, and then say the thing that you want to say. That's also an appropriate way. You just don't want to have such a big gap that the mouse goes up there to waiting, and you want to say the thing as it moves with it. So let's go through another example, and it's just a pattern that you can follow along with. So it's pretty easy. It's going to get very repetitive quickly, but I think it'll help illustrate the idea. So let's say you set the target. In 2 minutes, you'll know how to record, trim, and export. Perfect, right? Then next you can pre-train in 30 to 60 seconds, depending on what you're trying to show. Something like your timeline is going to equal cuts, and your canvas is going to equal views, and your export equals your MP4. So you're setting them up, providing them with clarity of what each of the pieces are, and then you can start to segment by your sub-goals. So for instance, you might have several phases, like phase 1, record a small cluster of steps and add a one-line recap. Then you'll move on to phase 2, edit, which is a small cluster and again, another recap. And then you can move into phase 3. And again, you never have to mention which phase you're on to the learner. You just follow the pattern where you're talking about exporting, where it's a small cluster and a recap. And again, you're going to want to signal and sync inside each cluster by naming the target clearly and saying the action as it happens. Now, at the very end of that video, you could close with the retrieval cue. This is a one-sentence summary that restates the goal and the crucial step. Whew, a lot, I know. But here's another maybe more concrete scenario. So let's say that we've got a video that we're going to make, again, about making an export of a video. Today's goal is simple: record, trim, export. Before we start, the parts you'll use are the timeline for cuts, the canvas to see changes, and the export to produce your MP4. Now let's get started. First with recording. Start a capture. Stop when you're done, and your clip appears in the project. For our next step, we're going to look at editing. What you're going to do is find the pause, make 2 cuts, remove the gap, and close it up. Now, the last thing we need to do is export. Choose an MP4 and confirm. The key idea is that you're explaining and showing things together. You don't need paragraphs on screen. You just want to focus on one thing at a time and help them move through the process seamlessly. If you have something going on like a continuous monologue, insert a micro reset. Something like, that completes phase 1. Here's what you should have now. Then you can continue on. Maybe you're reading big paragraphs on screen while narrating. Gosh, that's a lot. Replace them with labels or keywords. Put full sentences, again, in captions or in the transcript. Vague references like, it's up there somewhere. You would actually want to do something like name and locate. Top right, the save button. And if you cut to a screen, crop tight and use one subtle highlight. I'd also encourage you to increase the size of your mouse cursor so it's easy to see and it's always findable on your screen. Okay, let's start recapping because that was a lot, right? So cut the clutter. If it doesn't support meaning, it steals attention. You want to chunk the challenge. Teach parts first and group steps into small, paced segments. And then you want to guide the gaze. Be explicit about where to look and say the action as it happens. Now, your job isn't to merely make videos beautiful. It's to make them learnable. Control the visuals, control the timing, control the clarity. And cognitive overload, it's going to happen at some point. You've probably experienced it as you've watched videos. Just remember that on the other side of your video is a human being who is trying to learn and trying to understand. Now, you might know them or you might not know them, but your goal is to help them regardless to get through the complexity of whatever it is you're teaching. Here's a quick tip that we picked up a long time ago at TechSmith is if you say something like, oh, this is an easy process, just click blah, blah, blah. Guess what? It might be easy for you, but maybe not for them. And if there's a multitude of steps, you got a lot more steps, maybe more steps than even 3 or 4, all of a sudden you've added this complexity that you really, again, want to pull back on and be thinking about, how can I help them take this idea, this process that they're trying to learn, maybe it's even thought leadership, and how do I help them move it into the learning kind of process? Again, we want to go back here as we wrap up and think about, what is it that we're trying to do? Well, we're trying to make ideas, processes, all these things move from video into that working memory, into the long-term memory, so we can pull it out of the catalog, the library, and into, we have a good retrieval process. Video inherently is tough to do. It's tough to move from working memory into long-term memory. So you need to be thinking about, what are the things that are going to help to reinforce, to bring back up, and so allow that person to give them time to put it into long-term memory, but also encourages them to use it enough that it sticks. So, well, this has been a lot. It's a little bit different of an idea. I wanted to do something, as I've been thinking a lot about video creation from a learning perspective. And here's what I'll end on. I think if you go through this, you're probably going to say, whew, that was a lot. There is a lot of great research out there about cognitive load, about working memory, about the learning process, learning science. If you're looking for stuff related to visuals and multimedia, Richard Mayer is a great resource. Just search for Dr. Richard Mayer. Jonathan Halls has some great stuff out there. If you are in the ATD ecosystem, you might know Jonathan Halls. He's written this book, Creating Training Videos. This one's about using smartphones, but it's got a lot of great backup on kind of learning sciences and getting started. Jonathan's been a guest on the show. There's lots of great information out there. And I hope this is just a taste to get you going so that you want to make better videos. You want to make better, more effective learning videos. Now, the other thing I have to mention is that AI is going to play into this, right? You can take your ideas and pit them against AI. Ask it to pull on the current research. Ask it to look at things, to fact check, to make sure, are there better ways to move this through? I've just presented a series of ways, just some simple things. There's many more things that you can do. Lean to your AI. Just don't let it do everything. Be the human in the process, because your ideas are fantastic and your learners will benefit from what you bring to the table in that human way. Especially if you're helping them to not get overloaded cognitively, where that they can actually remember the things that they need to do and apply the learning that you're providing for them. Well, that's it. I hope that some of this hits home for some of you. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. You can always, of course, email us at thevisuallounge@techsmith.com. We'd love to hear from you, and we hope that you take a little time to level up every single day. Thanks, everybody.